Hello, good afternoon, namaste. My name is Bhumika and I welcome you all on behalf of the Complete Race 2020 team. In this global summit, there are many interesting panel sessions going on from our national and international speakers. And today we are here for a very interesting discussion on why it's important to think ahead and building responsible AI by design. We call this as a fireside chat. In this fireside chat, we'll understand how artificial intelligence is maturing rapidly as an incredibly powerful technology with seemingly limitless application. It's about combining human creativity with the scalability of machine learning to advance our knowledge base and understanding. To talk on this, we have with us today Ms. Rekha Menon, who is the chairperson and senior managing director at Accenture in India. She is the leading industry voice on advanced technology led innovation and socio-economic progress. Rekha ma'am is the vice chairman of NASCOM and a member of the National Council of CII, the National Executive Board of AmCham and USIBC India Advisory Council. She is also on the board of governors of her alma mater, Exceleri Business School, and two not-for-profit shows, Pratham Books and Akshara Foundation. We also have with us Mr. Abhishek Singh, who has been at the forefront of India's digital adoption strategy and has most recently led its pursuit in data and technology based innovation through MyGov and Digital India. As an officer of 1995 batch of IAS, he has over 20 years of experience in administration, development programming, and policy for embracing technology in governance. Over to Rekha, ma'am.
Thank you, Bhumika. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm really glad to be here on this vital first summit to deliberate on AI strategies for leading social change and inclusion and empowerment in India. And it's fairly clear that India's advanced technology prowess, if it's harnessed well, can not just unleash significant growth for India, but also strengthen our position in the global innovation economy. And according to Accenture's research, AI in particular, which is what we're discussing today, is the alpha technology, which will definitely drive much of this growth, with the potential to add about 1 trillion to India's economy in the next few years. If we look around us, AI-led transformation is already underway. In fact, we're on the verge of a very critical mass movement in artificial intelligence. And across every industry, organizations are encountering real success with AI on multiple fronts. And following the launch of the national strategy of artificial intelligence a few years ago, a lot has been done both at the government but also at the private players, industry, and academic level to advance the use of AI in problems facing India. So AI does offer tremendous opportunities, but against this backdrop, it's very easy to forget that AI also has a real bearing on people's lives, raising some very big questions around ethics, around trust, legality, around responsibility. And as AI increasingly permeates healthcare and government services, the stake gets much higher. And there are potential unintended consequences which could escalate. And therefore, enter responsible AI, because the focus on that is really crucial. And so we don't have to just use technology to do the right things. We have to use technology in the right way. Both elements are important. And if I look at what's been happening over the last few days in this summit, there are a lot of initiatives on how to unlock the value of AI for the issues, but we also need to look at how do we ensure that the growth, the AI progress, which is unstoppable, is we extract the most value in it, but we also keep the risks in check. And for that, we need really both strategic commitment and a clear execution framework, which focuses on ethical, transparent, and accountable use of AI, which is in a manner which is consistent with what people expect, but also our national values and our societal laws and our norms. And so therefore, to discuss this and speak on this topic, I'm so pleased to have Mr. Abhishek Singh with us because he's one of the key people responsible for policy formulation of the central government. Um, and it would be very interesting to hear his views on how the government of India is dealing with various aspects of developing a responsible AI foundation. So, welcome, Abhishek. Um, I wanted to start by saying that the government launched the National AI Framework about 2 years ago, and in the recent budget, the finance minister set aside more than about $1 billion as investment in AI, along with other advanced technologies. And then earlier in this event, our prime minister spoke about the tremendous role that AI can play in helping India and our ambition to be a global hub for AI. So my question for you is really, tell us where we are on our AI journey, especially with the focus on institutionalizing responsible AI.
Yeah, thank you, Rekha, and very insightful opening comments by you. And you have, in a way, captured the essence of what AI is. And while it is true that data science, deep learning, machine learning, all of it, and machine learning algorithms can help revolutionize things, but is technology and is use of technology only about algorithms, or do we go beyond that and keep the citizen or the humane element in the center of it? And that is also the core of the AI strategy that government of India has adopted. The strategy paper that was launched in 2018, around 2 years back, with regard to India's national strategy on AI, focuses on that. It talks about the AI for all strategy. It talks about responsible AI, and even the theme of this summit is responsible AI for using AI for social empowerment, transformation, and inclusion. How do we do that, and where we are? The focus has been to, in order to ensure that we are able to execute what has been spelled out in the national strategy on AI. We are very close to finalizing what is being called as the national program on AI, which our honorable minister and prime minister also spoke about. And national program on AI will focus on several dimensions. It will focus on promoting research in our top technical institutes, with regard to promoting investment in research in healthcare, in agriculture, in natural language processing, and in using AI for skilling, and so that ultimately the beneficiaries in the rural areas and the common man actually get advantage of that. So that is one core part of it. The other part is with regard to building AI infrastructure, in the sense that very often we find the number of supercomputers which are available today for our researchers or entrepreneurs to work on, to run their algorithms, are very limited. So the investments have been planned for building what is being called as Aravat, which will be the AI supercomputing infrastructure. So CDAC has also been working on that, using quantum computing and providing for infra on which the algorithms can be run. And using that, use cases will have to be tried out in certain key areas, which we are calling the moonshot projects, which will be taken up in the field of agriculture, in the field of healthcare, and the field of natural language processing, along with others. So what has been done so far is that a lot of startups have been working on it, and the only thing that is missing is the amount of investment that can come from the government or the private sector to kickstart that. So the summit has helped put these things at the center stage of policy formulation, and we hope that in the next few months, the 60 days it was mentioned by CEO Niti Aayog, that MeitY will be able to get the approvals for the investment that has been announced in the budget, and we will be implementing these projects with regard to promotion of his research in the form of Center for Research Excellence in Research Areas in the IITs and the triple ITs and the NITs, as also building the infrastructure and taking up projects in partnership with the ministries which are handling the services related to agriculture and health. So that is where we are, and we hope even the responsible AI approach paper has been published in August. So we would be looking at suggestions from all stakeholders, but the core of India's strategy will remain responsible AI, and we look forward in working with industry, working with tech partners with an objective to realize this dream into a reality.
Okay, so and I have several questions. So let me talk to one that you spoke about. You said, the focus will be on agriculture and healthcare, right? And healthcare is a big one, and the healthcare stack is being built up. But the base of that is data, right? I mean, data is the fundamental currency, and we all know that. And we know that in India, there's, how are we making sure we don't have enough data sets on healthcare? And it's not about just, how we maintaining, how are we going to get, ensuring that the data sets that will form the foundation for this will be reliable? How can we trust the outcomes? How will different data sets be pulled together? So any thoughts on that?
See, the data sets, it's not that they don't exist. The challenge is that they are not integrated and they are not standardized in the right format for being able to analyze those data sets and come to any real conclusion. So, what the National Digital Health Mission, which was launched on the 15th of August, tries to do is to create a framework for building a digital health ecosystem, which will include laying down standards for all kinds of health data, ensuring that the data is stored where it is created in a federated kind of architecture, and then the citizens have access to that, and for the aggregate level it's being available for research purposes and for running analytics like health analytics. So that would be the basic foundation of that. At present, the projects which have been taken up in the healthcare with regard to breast cancer screening or diabetic retinopathy or detection of tuberculosis, these projects have been relying on data sets that are available in the big hospitals, and based on that researchers have come up with algorithms which are helping them detect tuberculosis, say by the frequency of the cough, that the sound of the cough that comes, then detection of jaundice by the color of the skin that is there, or breast cancer screenings, or diabetic retinopathy by images of the by looking into the images of the eyes. So there has been significant success by various research initiatives in partnership with industry. All that we need to do is to standardize that, scale it up, and ensure that it ultimately addresses the core challenge that we have in healthcare of lack of sufficient healthcare personnel across the country in order to ensure early detection of many of these diseases. And we all know that if disease like diabetic retinopathy or breast cancer is detected early enough, then they are able to be cured much better. The probability of cure becomes much higher.
Yeah, and I would offer, speaking back on the data, saying, we need to set up very early effective data quality processes and frameworks around storage, around management, around transfer, right? And then there are also how recent is the data, and there's enough tools available. I know that Accenture has a data veracity offering which evaluates the provenance, the context, and the integrity of the data on a very systematic basis. So there has to be clear ownership and accountability along with solutions to measure data veracity. So that's, we have to build that into the system.
I fully agree. In fact, National Health Authority has been tasked for doing that. They are doing this. They have already set up the data standards, the data sharing protocols, the entire framework for data sharing, and even the framework for electronic health records that will be integrated with health lockers, which are being made part of the Digi Locker that we have. And even the Ayushman Bharat project, I think they have lots of data, digital data that's available as part of the Ayushman Bharat project, and that would be the initial set of data sets. But as we go along and as we ensure that all health data is digitalized to the extent possible, this will further fuel research and more innovative solutions in this field.
Yeah, and part of responsible AI is really the foundation principle is really the individual privacy and the security and the user consent, and which has been outlined in the Personal Data Protection Bill. But given that a lot of our people are illiterate, what framework does the government plan to safeguard citizen data and create that trust? Any thoughts on that?
See, the basic framework for that has been defined in the Personal Data Protection Bill, and the consent framework has been outlined in the consent framework that was published from 80 sometime back. And the underlying principle has been there that consent should be fair and consent should be informed. Just like signing off while using a software application, when you read 45 pages of terms and conditions and you just say that I agree, that's not consent. That's like forced consent. So when we talk of consent, especially in the context of health data, wherein the issues of privacy are paramount, one would have to ensure that whatever consent is being taken is fair and it is informed, and people are educated with regard to what they are signing up for. So in case you sign up for digital health records, you would get to know that you would have the ultimate right to give a consent of sharing it with any other health service provider if you so need. So that has been defined very clearly, and that is the framework on which the electronic health records are being built up also, that I will have access to my digital health records. So my health locker will have all my medical reports from whatever hospitals I have got through or whatever test reports I have done. But if I want to share that information with another health service provider, then a message in the digital format will be sent to me, informed that you are sharing this for getting a better second opinion or some follow-up opinion. And then when I say yes, then only you do that. And the person who is taking that data with the consent will also be required to follow certain practices, that he will, if the consent is only for using it for medical advice for the concerned person, he will not have the permission to use it for any other purpose. But in case a medical health service provider wants to use it for some research purposes or for some experimental projects that they are running in, then another consent for that purpose will have to be taken from the citizen, and this will have to be informed. Yes, it is true that a lot of people in India are not very literate and not very aware, and they would not even understand the ramifications of what this means and how this works. But we will have to we start with the premise that we have to educate people and take consent only when it's given. We have a significantly large population in the country, and even if those who give their informed consent, still we will have larger number of data sets than any other country on the planet, in the world. So, yeah.
And so and I agree, but moving beyond data sets and the technical aspect of it, because responsible AI is not just technology alone, right? As you yourself agreed, that it requires an approach which is rooted in trust, and it requires an approach which starts at the top, right? If I look at from a private sector perspective, if I look from an Accenture perspective, we hold it right at the CEO level, saying, how am I making sure that all AI that we use and build is responsible, right? That there's trustworthy, that it's reliable, that there's it's understandable, that it's secure, and it's teachable. So, trust is our approach that we take in our principles. So, I would believe that, is there a nodal agency that needs to be set up, which goes beyond directional AI ethics codes actually, and looks at very prescriptive, specific guidelines, and then checks and balances to make sure that the trust principles are being followed. Is there any thought around that?
Yeah, there is. In fact, ultimately, some regulation will be required. While it's fair to assume that everybody will be ethical and everybody will follow the principles that are there, but again, businesses sometimes and motives, we can't always predict the way they will take. So one will have to, and as government, one will have to ensure that while one would encourage free growth of enterprise and research, but at the same time, the principles around regulation, if it requires a regulator, so it will be. So ultimately, one will have to check that while we allow ethical use of technology, but any violation of trust or violation of the principles for which any information is shared with any entity, if that is broken, then there should be penal provisions. There should be a cost associated to that, in order to ensure that there is order and everybody follows the responsible AI principles. So that would be required ultimately.
Yeah.
PDP also talks about a regulator, but again, with regard to use of technology and with regard to use of data and with regard to ethical and responsible use of AI, it will be very much required.
Yeah, I agree, and it's not so. I mean, one is just the legal framework, but also it is for organization. There should also be the brand perception, because you'll be out of business, and we've seen that happen in the private sector a couple of times, right? A couple of agencies which didn't follow the responsible AI code and had their brand suffer.
That's also a matter of culture.
That business suffers. So yes,
it's also a matter of organizational culture, like how organizations are built. So most companies who have been like doing this for a long time, they have certain tradition for ensuring that they will follow the highest ethical standards, and they will not cut corners, and they will not try to do something which would not meet their own standards. So that's there. But yes, this is a field in which we are having lots of new companies coming in, lots of new startups coming in, being proposed. So one cannot be sure of the motives of everyone. So as a government, one will have to be cautious and ensure that ultimately the rights of the citizens with regard to what their data is and what their information is, how it is used, is regulated and protected.
Okay. Moving to another topic, related topic, right? We're talking responsible AI, and therefore to devolve that responsible AI, because we need broad scale skill building. I mean, you spoke to that, right? Uh, Now, we need to have broad AI curriculum from school onwards, and there's some efforts to introduce it. I know that a lot of organizations working through NASSCOM and Niti Aayog just launched the AI Step Up module for schools, but we'll need this across the country. But more than that, it'll also have to be, the training will have to go beyond the specifics of how to write code, but how to write responsible code. That's at one level. But the second is AI training needs to go beyond the engineers and coders, right? It has to be built into the training of all the decision makers, all the policy bodies, all the CEOs, so that they can get onto the right agenda and drive the right development efforts. So, any thoughts on that, or even how do you believe that will happen?
Yes, in fact, that has been thought over, deliberated, and we are, in fact, within the government as part of the capacity building program, especially for the policymakers, for state governments, and for people who are handling agriculture, education, healthcare, skilling, or core departments where AI will have an impact directly on the citizens. The thinking about responsible AI, about training them into ethics around AI, and about giving them skills in trying to understand what they are, if they are implementing a tech project, what is it going to do. So for that, BHE has the capacity building schemes and projects with which we are imparting such trainings to the state government officials and to the officials of various Government of India ministries. But it has to go beyond the government officials. It has to go into every organization which is trying to bring in AI. It's very fashionable to say that every tech company that I meet today, they say that yes, we are doing AI. So everybody is doing it. It's not that AI is very rocket science and something. It has been being done for a very long time, and only thing is that now it's become, the impact has become more with the amount of data that we have and the amount of compute capacity that we have. So while we are doing so, how do we design responsible AI, responsible AI or ethics by design? How do we build in at the design stage only? Like for example, if we are building, say, a screening tool, an employment screening tool, how do we ensure that the inherent biases which exist in the normal human systems and the data sets that historic data might have certain biases? Maybe, for example, it's widely believed that in most recruitments women are not preferred. So the historical data set about recruitment will have that inherent bias against women built in. So will an AI based model who is doing that, will it predict the same thing? Suppose I have a bot which does screening of applications. Will it screen out women? If it does, it's not correct. So how do we correct this bias in the design stage only? Similarly, about weaker sections of society. How do we factor that? If the government has a policy of promoting weaker sections of society and the AI-based tool has to be designed based on that, how do we build it in at the design stage only? It cannot be something that we start running it and then we say that, oh, what is the solution is fair because there is no human element. But the technology, it's not that technology would always be fair. It is relying on past data, and if there are biases or if there are inconsistencies in the past data, the output will be as incorrect as the past decisions have been. So these things one will have to be cautious of, and while designing it, build in appropriate checks and balances at the code level or at the design level to ensure that such things do not get amplified when it is implemented.
No, and you're right. I mean, recruiting, you use the recruiting example, and there is a classic case that one of the big multinationals globally had to pull their recruitment bot out because it was based on old data, which meant all the coders were men, and therefore it was only recruiting men, and women were being pulled out of the recruitment process. Or you talked about the weaker section of society, and similarly, a financial services company in the US, their AI tool really actually weeded out all the minority loan applicants because it was using an old data set. So you're absolutely right. It has to be AI by design at the coding level, but it also has to be responsible AI by design at the policy level.
Correct.
And with enough loops and checks and balances back into the system. And it's a new area that we're all entering into. So we'll have to iterate and learn. As long as we are very clear that the guardrails are there and the intent to make sure that it's ethical and it's explainable and it's egalitarian so that everybody gets benefit from it, then I think we'll be on the right path.
Right. In fact, if you look at even the assistants that we have, like it's Alexa, it's Siri. If you go to Railways website, you have a chatbot. It's called Disha. Somewhere it's called Tia. So it's
Always women.
Yeah. So the inherent bias in designing the name also is that women are somebody who are assistants, who are not the top policy makers. So this is inherent in the way we design. But yes, if we are conscious of that, that's why when we did Viger's chatbot, and in fact Accenture was part of that, we called it Sathi. We tried to pick up a gender neutral name. So we called it MyGov Sathi, so that it applies to both men and women. And we had the caricature which represented both men and women. So that's how we will have to start thinking, and this is required at the higher levels. Like if you leave it to the coders, they will follow what Siri or what Apple or what Google is doing. But if you bring it at the highest levels, this understanding and this belief that one has to think over these issues, then this bias can be eliminated in a great manner.
So you talked about MyGov Sathi, and thank you for that. It was great collaborating with
thank you,
government
Accenture, for doing this for us.
And I wanted to use that as an example of that was a great example of collaborating with two different, Accenture, Microsoft, and the government collaborated together, which brought a virtual AI agent in using data analytics, natural language processing, and conversational AI to help society during the pandemic. Now, that brings me to the question on ecosystem. So, what's your ask from the industry and startups in this context as the AI-based solutions? That's question one. And I know we're running out of time, so I'll pull all my three questions together. How does the government plan to work with academia to emphasize the importance of responsible AI? And third question, how are you pulling all the different ecosystem efforts together into one so that we can really leverage the power?
Yeah, in fact, that has been an issue that we have been grappling for a long time, because what we find is that whenever we visit an IIT or a triple IT or academic institution or a university, or an ICR institute, you find that they have brilliant solutions. But the challenge becomes that how does that solution go from the lab to the market, or how do we productize it? Very often we find that scientists, there are no incentives for productization. They're happy with a paper that they can publish or a patent that they can get. But at the same time, there are startups and there are investors or industrialists or companies who are looking for such solutions. So what we need to do, and what we have been doing for some time, is trying to bring together everyone on one platform, like this conference has done, in which we are letting communications happening between the research institutions and startups and industry, and trying to see what is common between them. If there are scalable solutions which any university or IIT has built in, can a startup or can a product company adopt it and take it to the market and create value out of it? And what the government does, government needs to provide a policy framework which encourages such partnerships. Because without that, we will never be able to catch up with the best in the world. Look at the US and all; they have the partnerships. In fact, I always give this example of Boston. Like the financial district is on one part of the city, the MIT and the Harvard are on one side of the city, but always the investors come to these coffee shops and beer cafes and see what the techies are doing, and then they pick up the ideas to fund that. So if we can provide a bridge between industry, investors, and the researchers and academicians, and startup entrepreneurs or dreamers who are in the final year of college, and connect them, and the government allows that and ensures that any solution which is scalable and which is for use by the government can also take that up. So that would ensure that a complete partnership between research, academia, industry, startup, and government is ensured, to promote such innovative ventures. So that is what is the need of the hour.
I absolutely agree, and that will just power India well beyond anybody else because we have the potential. We
Right.
just have to get these ingredients in place with the baseline of responsible AI at the bottom of it, and helping society, but also that this could then become examples of what we could export out. We could become the hub for very excellent AI solutions across the world, not just for the bottom of the pyramid, but for society. When we've done it before, we're the technical powerhouse. I don't see why we can't be the powerhouse for AI developed solutions and services.
Yeah, and any solution, any AI powered solution based on data sets in India, if it works in India, then one can take it for granted that it will work for anywhere else in the world. Because nobody else will have so much of data sets to rely on. So we do have the opportunity, we do have the potential to translate this into reality and be the AI garage, not only for India, but for the world.
Good. With that, I think we're at the top of the hour.
Yeah, I guess so. So I must thank you, Rekhaji, for this very engaging conversation, and we will take this offline and ensure that what we have discussed is actually translates into reality.
Absolutely. Here anytime. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.